April 1945. Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. A cool wind swept across the base as a transport truck pulled through the gate, grinding to a stop beside the processing building. Captain Sarah Henderson of the Women's Army Corps stood waiting with her clipboard pressed to her chest. She had seen dozens of prisoner convoys in the past year, but never one like this. Inside the truck were 43 German women captured in the final chaos of a dying Reich. They were not frontline soldiers, but clerks, radio operators, nurses, and administrators swept up in the collapse. Most were between 19 and 35. All were thin, exhausted, and terrified. Henderson had processed hundreds of German POWs before many arrived arrogant or silent, some defiant, others hollowed out by defeat. But as she watched these women step down from the truck, she realized this was different. Their faces were pale and their eyes hollow. Their uniforms hung loose on their frail bodies. The smell reached her before they even reached the line, a sickly mix of decay, sweat, and unwashed fear. It wasn't defiance she saw, nor pride or hatred, but something else. Something fragile that looked almost like hope. The procedure was routine. Medical inspection, delousing, showers, clean clothes, then the barracks. Henderson had done it hundreds of times. But as she watched these women, she felt a weight in her chest. Nothing about this would be routine. She called to Sergeant Mary Kowalski, her interpreter. "Tell them," Henderson said, "they'll be examined by the doctor, then taken to the showers. They'll get soap, clean clothes, and a meal." Kowalski translated the words into German. Then something unexpected happened. Several of the prisoners began to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to rise from the very core of them. One woman gasped, "Soap? Real soap?" Another covered her mouth as if she could not believe what she had just heard. Kowalski hesitated, then repeated softly, "Yes, real soap. For washing." The reaction spread like a wave. One woman dropped to her knees, trembling, crying uncontrollably. Within moments, nearly half the group was weeping, some clutching each other, others standing motionless, unable to comprehend. Henderson thought they were breaking down from shock. She radioed for Captain James Morrison, the camp's medical officer. When he arrived, he looked at the scene, 43 German women crying at the mention of soap, and asked, "What in God's name happened?" Through broken sentences and halting translation, the truth emerged. They hadn't seen real soap in over a year. By the end of the war, Germany's infrastructure had collapsed. Soap, once an ordinary household item, had vanished. In 1944, substitutes were made from clay and chemicals, leaving skin raw and burning. By 1945, even that was gone. The women spoke of washing with cold water or sand, of scrubbing until their skin bled, of the shame of their own smell. One whispered, "We could not even clean our hands before eating. We were not people anymore." Henderson stood silent, her throat tight. Then she said, "Sergeant, skip the medical inspection for now. Take them to the showers. Give them all the soap they want. Let them be clean again." The shower room was nothing special. Concrete floors, metal pipes, the smell of disinfectant. But for these women, it might as well have been a palace. Bars of white soap sat stacked neatly on wooden shelves. When the first woman picked one up, she held it like something holy. The others followed, some laughing through tears, others frozen with disbelief. When the water came on, steam filled the air, and the sound of crying echoed off the concrete. One older woman stood fully clothed under the water, her hands shaking. After a long moment, she began to undress slowly, tears mixing with the water. For nearly 2 hours, they washed. They scrubbed their hair, their skin, their clothes, over and over as if trying to erase the entire war from their bodies. The guards said nothing. Some turned away, others cried quietly. Kowalski whispered to Henderson, "Captain, we had no idea. They weren't soldiers. They were just surviving in hell." The medical exams later confirmed the rest. Malnutrition, scurvy, infections, broken bones, untreated illness. Dr. Morrison wrote in his report, the physical condition of these prisoners suggests not just wartime deprivation, but total societal collapse. As the days passed, the women began to speak more freely. They described the last months of Germany: streets dark, hospitals without medicine, no food, no soap, no heat. They spoke of propaganda promising victory while they starved. Soap had become more than hygiene. It was a symbol of civilization itself. Greta, a nurse from Dresden, told Kowalski, "We were told Americans were monsters, that you would torture us. But you gave us soap. You gave us dignity. I no longer know what to believe." Word of the soap incident spread through Camp Gruber. Officers discussed it over dinner. Some found it absurd, others heartbreaking. Henderson couldn't stop thinking about it. In her next memo, she wrote, "These women are not our enemies. They are victims of the same system we fought to destroy. Their condition shows what tyranny does, not only to its foes, but to its own." Because of her report, the women received better food, medical care, and reading materials. Henderson's reasoning was simple. Winning the war is not enough if we forget how to be human in victory. When the German women were repatriated later that year, many sent letters back to Camp Gruber. One from Greta arrived months later. Her handwriting was shaky, her English broken. "You gave us soap when we expected pain. You gave us warmth when we expected hate. I will never forget that moment. You showed us that not all enemies are cruel, and not all kindness is weakness." For Henderson, that letter became her most precious keepsake. She retired from the army a year later, worked as a social worker for decades, and when people asked her about the war, she never talked about strategy or victory. She talked about that day. "The day 43 German women cried because someone offered them soap," she would say. "That was when I understood what kind of war we were really fighting, one for the soul of civilization." Wars are often remembered for weapons, battles, and treaties. But sometimes, history turns on smaller things. A bar of soap, a bucket of hot water, an act of decency in a place built for war. For those women, that day was not about surrender. It was about being human again.